Hey, what's up you guys? Bloody Jacob here to bring another set of action movie reviews, and this time we're going to be talking about a couple Steven Seagal movies as well as a couple of Michael Jai White. And going right into it, we're going to be tackling End of a Gun, starring Steven Seagal and directed by Keone Waxman yet again, along with Code of Honor, followed up by Michael Jai White and Adrian Palicki in SWAT Under Siege, and finally Michael Jai White's latest remake, sort of, sequel, not really, of Jean-Claude Van Damme's Welcome to Sudden Death. So here we are. And first up, we're going to be talking about Code of Honor, obviously starring Sensei Steven Seagal. This movie came out in 2016 and was not directed by Keone Waxman, but by, excuse me while I Google it, Michael Winnick, also starring Helena Matson, Craig Sheffer, James Russo, and Louis Mandylor, who's gone on to be in a couple much better action films like the Debt Collectors films and such. But yeah, it's about an FBI agent who pursues his former mentor, a vengeful colonel who's waging one-man war against criminals. And yeah, sort of like Steven Seagal going Punisher, right? I mean, he's a vigilante, he's taking out different criminals within the city with military precision. He has some sort of his own code, right? Get it? Code of Honor. And some people disagree with his methods or how he's going about it, right? It's not like the Punisher. It's on the very surface, it is. I'm a big Punisher fan, so it's not really clicking for me that way. It's just like the similar motive, I guess. Steven Seagal's character's wife and son were gunned down in front of him, so now he's trying to somehow seek justice or honor for that, right? And not necessarily be able to find the exact lowlife because the police can't determine it, but basically kill all the criminals until he inevitably would have. And then you have Craig Sheffer playing his former protege who's trying to stop him, maybe has his own sort of side agenda on things. Louis Mandylor is the detective looking into everything and trying to make sense of it, almost as much as the viewers are, apparently. Now, I don't want to lay into this movie too hard, or do I? There are a lot of bad and subpar Steven Seagal movies out there, but I disagree with some. I don't think this is actually the very worst of them. I think movies like Attack Force, perhaps, or movies like Black Dawn are actually a bit worse for me, and I didn't die watching those either. I am a Steven Seagal fan. I am ready to admit it at this point. Something about him keeps me watching movie after movie. Some of them I enjoy more than others, sure, but this movie at least went for something a little different. Steven Seagal is in the shadows a lot of the time, even though he does actually, get a fair bit of scenes. He is the star of the movie. It's him and Craig Sheffer, they're co-stars. He doesn't get a lot of dialogue necessarily, though, until past the 45-minute mark. And I actually think some of the sniping scenes are pretty badass, until later on when it gets very apparent that's an overusage of CG blood and stuff. That kind of makes it a bit monotonous at one point. But especially the opening scene, I think, is actually quite good and cool. And, again, it's more of a crime thriller, maybe a bit of action, at least towards, the last half and such. It tries to make you think, Steven Seagal's character, Sykes, he keeps telling Craig Sheffer's character, are you the kind of man that would save the world if no one knew about it? And that kind of philosophical, humanity sort of thing. You could argue how it's executed or not, but a little bit more effort into the writing, or a little bit more to the writing than usual, I guess, I don't know. But it's definitely not the worst. It's definitely not the laziest Steven Seagal movie either, I don't think. It was actually sort of interesting to watch. Is it one you'd really rewatch again? Maybe not necessarily. But I'm getting it for my collection. Fuck it. So yeah, it wasn't too bad. I gave it like a 6 out of 10 on IMDb. If I had to be precise with it, I'd give it like a 6.8, 6.9 out of 10. So yeah, and the only real issue with it, besides some of that CG blood and everything, is some of the other actors are a bit flat, besides the ones I mentioned. Again, the CG blood, and the ending is a bit confusing. I mean, there's theories all over the place about it. There's like 3 or 4 different ways you could try and make sense of it. I could go into that right now, but I'll just let you decide. One way basically takes away from the whole story, one way sort of makes it a little bit more even, and the other just makes it even more confusing. So it's really up to you. And next up we're going to be talking about End of a Gun, starring Steven Seagal and another of his collaborations with director Keone Waxman, who actually consistently who consistently actually puts out good movies with the sensei, or at least decent, passable movies. A lot of them I've quite liked, from A Dangerous Man to some of the other ones. So yeah, I don't know if I'd say they're like a Scott Adkins and Isaac Florentine sort of combo, but it's more reliable of a team up than I think people give it credit for. And I liked End of a Gun. The acting is even more uneven in this than the Code of Honor movie, I think. But I will say it's more entertaining in the way you're expecting than Code of Honor was. You have Steven Seagal, of course. Not his worst performance either. I mean, he's his typical self, but he actually has some pretty decent one-liners here and some just decent sort of random insults. He appears to actually not be hating himself while he's there, so that's good. Florin Pesek Jr. is basically our main antagonist for the movie. He has the look. His delivery is a little dry, but he has the presence for the kind of scummy bad guy he's supposed to be, I guess. Definitely not as unmemorable as some of the other ones are. J.D. one is where you kind of have a problem with Lisa Durant, because End of a Gun's about a mall security guard, a former federal agent, crossing paths with a drug kingpin's enforcer after he saves a woman from danger. It's kind of a weird sum up of it, but yeah, the woman in danger caught up in all this is J.D. Wynn, and she's okay. She has the look you'd expect and everything. Just some of her lines you can tell are very rehearsed and just very ready to go. It feels artificial, but it is what it is with that. There is actually a knife fight towards the end of the movie, which is very rare these days in a Steven Seagal movie, whereas before it was a bit of a trademark, sort of thing of his films to have. And it's pretty choppy, as was Code of Honor, by the way, with its hand-to-hand action. It's also not the worst Defender that I've ever seen either, and I actually enjoyed the little knife fight we did get at the end of it. A nice little throwback to classic Seagal, I feel like. And the ending, it has a little turn in it that is satisfying and I approved of. Not the most unpredictable thing in the world in hindsight, but it still added a little bit more to it, a little bit more enjoyment, I guess, because of it. So yeah, I didn't mind End of a Gun. I liked it a decent bit. I'd give it probably like a 7.2, 7.5 out of 10, somewhere in there. So still keeping it lukewarm, but I think it was actually pretty almost solid. And then changing gears to Michael Jai White. First up, we have SWAT Under Siege. Of course, this is a spin-off of the Colin Farrell, Samuel Jackson, LL Cool J, and Michelle Rodriguez movie. This is like the third one, which isn't connected to anything. It's its own thing. After watching Welcome to Sudden Death, I wanted to go back and watch another one I hadn't seen to get a different taste in my mouth with it. We'll talk about Welcome to Sudden Death in a few minutes here. But yeah, SWAT Under Siege. I don't even know if I have to read something off of IMDb or anything, but here we go. SWAT compound comes under fire from an international terrorist who relentlessly and violently pursues a mystery man who is apprehended by Seattle SWAT after a raid goes horribly wrong. So yeah, like an Assault on Precinct 13 sort of thing. Michael Jai White's a dangerous, bad guy, but our lead officer here has to release him, to get help, and because Michael Jai White has knowledge of who's attacking and everything, and maybe Michael Jai White isn't so bad after all, that sort of thing. And it's a very simple, straightforward premise, but it's actually a fair bit enjoyable. It's nothing overly memorable. It's not like an all-time great flick or something, but surprisingly fine, Michael Jai White has a pretty heavy accent he's doing in this. It's not the worst I've ever heard. His character is somewhat interesting, even though he's typical Michael Jai White. It is what it is with some of these stars. But he works in this. He actually gets some solid few fight scenes to go into that I think came off pretty well. Adrienne Palicki, a lot of you know her from the first episode of Supernatural, burning on a ceiling. She was in Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. a few years ago. And, she's good here. Her and the other lead besides Michael Jai White are kind of at odds, so it's that kind of thing. Our lead, I should probably get his name. He is Sam Yeager playing Travis Hall. I think he has a kid on the way or something like that. So there's your suspense there and your vulnerability. The characters are mostly flat. Sam Yeager was okay. He felt mostly believable in the role, but at the same time kind of a bit dull. We had Ty Olsson, who's been in a lot of genre work. I think he was deserved of more time in the movie than he got, but still nice to see him. Kira Zagorski, I like the look of her and her role. But yeah, it plays out pretty much exactly the way you'd expect. There's a little twist towards the end, but you kind of expect it with these types of premises as well. I did enjoy Michael Jai White as this mystery scorpion character. Worked well enough for his motif. And like I said, there are actually some solid fight scenes in this that should at least make you content. Again, I won't say anything overly memorable, but it does what you think it's going to do, and there's not necessarily anything great, but there's also not anything wrong with that either. So if I had to rate it, I'd give it like a 7.7, 7.8 out of 10. Maybe an 8 out of 10, just solid, fine. There you go. And then next up, it was also directed by Tony Giglo. I probably butchered his name there, but it was filmed competently as well, I guess I should add. And finally, we have Michael Jai White's latest, Welcome to Sudden Death, a remake. I've heard it's called a sequel to Van Damme's Sudden Death in the 90s. Not really a sequel, it's basically just a remake, a retelling, whatever you want to call it. Michael Jai White's security for a big arena, basketball games going on though instead of hockey. And of course you have Michael Eklund and his group, with their own agenda breaking in there to steal information. They hold, prominent figures within the city hostage. And Michael Jai White has to juggle trying to take them down and making sure his kids are safe and that sort of thing. So yeah, it's a remake. I'm sorry. I will say it was good to see Michael Eklund here. He's been in a lot of, horror genre work that I've loved. See No Evil 2, Winona Earp. He was in Van Helsing a little bit. And I could keep going on and on about him. He plays a decent baddie here, definitely not Powers Booth level like the original film, but a different sort of guy. He at least has a little bit more charisma and sort of interest with his line delivery than someone else might have had. So I don't mind him, even though he kind of seems like he's phoning it into it. The movie is kind of what it is. I was looking forward to this too because I'm a big Michael Jai White fan. I think he's one of the best martial artists we've had in the last 15, 20 years. He's very convincing. I think he's definitely legitimate enough. I've liked him ever since Spawn and everything like that. And I was looking forward to this too because I love Sudden Death, Van Damme's Sudden Death. It's one of my favorite Van Damme films. And this, unfortunately, isn't on that same level. I definitely recommend going to watch something like Final Score with Dave Bautista and Ray Stevenson and Pierce Brosnan instead. If you want something that a little more successfully emulates that type of premise. This is okay. There are some decent fight scenes. But I don't know. It's filmed in a very boring way. The lighting and coloring is very, very bland. It's just full of stereotypes. There's also this comedic character And I know this genre, lends itself to being full of stereotypes, but it's different when it like rears its head in the way this movie does. Yeah, Gary Owen, I think his name is the comedic relief here. He just remove him out of the movie. He's not funny. I don't know why they put him in this movie. It just feels like unnecessary. Nothing would change if he wasn't in the movie. The kids playing as kids are actually all right, though. I will say that. And Michael Jolliet, of course, is very good, and you can tell he doesn't have to try too much to do some of these some of these moves he does, and he's fine doing it, and he has his usual sort of personality, so it works fine on his end. But this just feels like a very sort of phoned in, like kind of sleepwalking sort of movie. They try to add a bit of a fun element to it, but this comes off like very amateurish, unfortunately. Yeah, I was pretty disappointed by this. I might buy it at some point just because of the completionist in me with the different Star Wars collections I have. But it's definitely not one I'm jumping to, and I only gave it a 5 out of 10 on IMDb, guys. So yeah, I'd give it like an F. Maybe not quite that harsh, but I'd give it like a D minus, at least somewhere in there. I'm only keeping it above water because of Michael Jai White, and even that sort of he doesn't go as far as he'd want in this movie. It was directed by Dallas Jackson. It's just kind of there on that end. So yeah, then I guys thought about all of these. You can follow me on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, like, subscribe, and I'll catch you guys next time. Peace.